Welcome to Conversations with Joy podcast.
Okay, well, welcome back, everyone. This is our second broadcast. You remember the first was four episodes on radical forgiveness and joy. And it was such a hit that I've got Melody Learon back again. The content we've chosen is about community, connecting with community, and this little bit about Melody. She, if you've heard what she was doing before, she's just so connected with her community, especially when tragedies, disasters have come about. And she and I decided that for the next 3 or 4 episodes, we're going to talk about how you can begin community building and be a resource to everyone in your community so that we can all share, be together, be less lonely, and get out of the fear piece. So with that, Melody, I welcome you. And, I want you to share, and if you have to read it, it's fine because it's something you wouldn't memorize, but you sent me an email just a minute ago about what we have chosen as a date for our podcast on community. Would you read that for us, please?
Yeah, and I will just start by saying, here's how it came to me. At the beginning of the year, I was praying, I was in the woods, I was wanting to know what my theme was for the year. And I like to take this dictation from Spirit. So I'm in the inquiry, I'm hiking along, and 2 words come to me. And my first response was, no, could I have something else, please? I love that. And the words that came to me were connected community. And as soon as I felt it, I didn't even really understand it, but as soon as I felt it, I knew it was going to require something of me. And I already felt like I was doing a lot for my different communities.
Yes.
And so I said, can I have something else? And Spirit was like, no. And so then I was like, okay, what do we mean by this? And so as I started to explore, as I started to understand and learn, what I realized is that I have had the privilege of, for all my life, I've been sensitive. I've been not just really sensitive to the people around me, but I've been sensitive to the land. I've been sensitive to nature, and I've had 30 homes across the U.S. and Canada. So I've had a vast spiritual geography. And because of my sensitivity and relationship with the land where I'm living, I have had certain, let's say, symptoms or sensations when things are happening. And so I think before most Americans, I was aware of climate change. I was in groups with climate scientists trying to understand what was happening so I could understand what my body was reading, what my body was picking up on. And it certainly didn't feel like a privilege, 15, 20 years ago to be learning about what was coming. But now, Joy, now it does feel like a privilege because things are happening and I understand the patterns. And one of my teachers at Desiree Attaway offered a class at the beginning of the year called Navigating the Polycrisis.
Oh, say that again.
Navigating the Polycrisis.
Yes.
And the minute I heard the word polycrisis, I knew in my body that she understood what I have been learning about and researching. It's not just extreme climate events. And please understand, for those of you who don't know, that I lived through Hurricane Helene. I live north of Asheville. My community was deeply affected by that disaster.
Yes.
Also, I've been observing the economy I've been observing the housing crisis.
Mm-hmm.
I've been observing the increasing wealth disparity in our country, the increasing health disparity.
Yes.
I have loved ones who are dealing with big health challenges.
Yeah.
So, because of all this, like there's a privilege in being able to see something coming.
Yes, the knowingness. Absolutely.
The knowingness, right? The climate researchers I follow talks about the fact that we are in a time now of discontinuity. In other words, we may want to bring back the old normal, and that's not going to happen.
That's not going to happen. No.
That's not going to happen. So this political upheaval, all of the things are all part of a piece. They're all part of a pattern. And so, when Spirit told me, okay, honey, connected community, and I went into the inquiry of what does that mean?
Yeah.
I got some direction. And when you said to me a few weeks ago, okay, what's next? I said, well, I mean, I could talk about what I'm doing here this year. Now, when we moved to Asheville, I found my communities. We live 20 minutes north of the city. I found my communities in the city. I've had the privilege in all of these 30 homes around the US and Canada of being able to play and worship and work with a very diverse group of people where I lived.
Yeah.
And that isn't so true here where I live in this neighborhood. This neighborhood, like many neighborhoods, is outside of the city. There's not as much diversity. And the reason I wasn't thrilled when I heard the words connected community is because, my neighborhood isn't as diverse as I would prefer.
So the thing about the communities, I think that there's something even larger at play here. I remember moving into the community I've been in for 30 years, and for the first time in my life saying, this is an amazing community to be a part of. Diverse, people want to help each other. We celebrate together. We're there for like, what plumber are you using? And then all of a sudden, maybe, I want to say 5 years ago, what I noticed is a lot of people have moved and others have come in. And even though it's diverse, that's why I'm tagging what you had just said, it's very diverse. And yet there's no community as such. And so last January, I had a party just to try to think of how I can recreate what I had enjoyed for such a long time and never before in my life. And people came and nothing changed. Nothing changed, even with the diversity. So I'm thinking there's something else at play where the connection, I even offer, let's share who we use to do things around our community, and it's just not landing. So when you said we want to do something, you told me about the background about connected community, I went, well, with the tools that we'll identify, I'll try again. I mean, sometimes you just the timing isn't always off. So,
right.
Yeah.
And I think too, the pandemic did isolate us and make us a little bit less connected. And it's a skill. It's a skill. Teachers, elementary school teachers will tell you it's a skill and it's an intelligence that we can develop. So here's what I have done. Last fall, when we lived through the aftermath of the hurricane, weeks without power, weeks without water, we went door to door. My husband and I went door to door because we have solar panels. We have a battery. We set up a charging station in the driveway, and we wanted to assess the needs. So I started in January, when I got this hit about what connected community was going to mean, I started by reaching out to some of the most vulnerable folks that we met, some of the ones we didn't know real well. And I asked them if they would be interested in coming over for dinner and just having a chat about preparedness. And so we've done that with several folks. And so I'll get to my next step. But that initial phase, I call it connect. It doesn't have to, if you're short on time like I am, it doesn't have to be more than just connecting with one person or couple or family and saying, hey, let's have a meal together. I'd like to talk about preparing, how we found ourselves both prepared and unprepared in the last storm. And so, right now I have flowers blooming in my garden. I have produce to share. I'll be connecting with a few more neighbors, just carrying something with me. But then, so then after those initial connections are made, here's the part of the plan that I'm doing now. I'm forming a small kind of core group of neighbors who are all interested in this topic of being more prepared for what's coming, for the Polycrisis. And so one way to do this, I formulated a little script, is to text folks if you have their numbers, or just to put a little note at their door that says, neighbors, in these uncertain times, hurricanes, fires, outages, pandemics, all of which my neighborhood has experienced, it's good to know each other better. Want to join a simple group chat for check-ins and resource sharing? Text me to be added. There's no spam here, just neighbors. So I'm calling it,
I like it.
I'm calling it, for my neighborhood, Soup and Salad and Solidarity.
Oh, fabulous. I'm copying it right away. Soup, salad, and solidarity. Wow, it's making me even feel like more peaceful. Like there's so many people who say, what can I do given the climate, all kinds of climate? What can I do? And just to be able to say that you can do this. You're not alone unless that's a choice. But there's so many people who are just stuck as they are with grief and forgiving others. And how can we unstick ourselves? That's something we even say. But there's just such power in knowing that you're not alone. I want to refer to something. One of the responses from our Radical Forgiveness and Grief podcast, someone wrote to me and went, I just can't get out of bed. And that was it. And I responded, you don't have to get out of bed now. So luxuriate, if you will, under the covers, cuddling up with a person, a teddy bear, the sheet, and just be. And you don't have to do anything. And then when you're ready, you can get up and proceed. And you can call me, or you can text me and or Melody about that. But that's just, to me, an indicator of so many other responses that have said, I just don't know what to do. I'm just so scared.
Overwhelmed. Yeah.
That's the word. I'm overwhelmed. And we really want these podcasts, Melody, with your support and others we'll be inviting, is to just see that we have fear and then we do something anyway, which is courage. So having fear stop us, which stands for false events appearing real. To be able to acknowledge and be aware that, yes, that's happening in my body, and I can do something different, which is why I'm so happy that the second series deals with connected community. And you have many communities. I know that about you. And you're so rich with relationships, if I haven't said it before, this is our motto. Relationships are everything.
Everything.
You know?
Everything. Yeah.
Yeah.
So here's why I felt like this would be a bit of a challenge, because I had so many communities outside
Yes.
my neighborhood that
Yes.
I'm giving to, I'm receiving from. And here's what Spirit had to remind you. Having a core group in your neighborhood is actually going to make you feel more resourced and more resilient. It's going to help drop the overwhelm.
Yes.
And
Because you'll be grounded.
yeah.
You're
Yeah.
grounded. Yes.
Yeah. So here's the next step. So the next step, when the core group of us get together to share a meal later this month, I'm going to bring up the questions. And I love the idea of leading always with questions.
Yes.
What does it feel like to prepare for uncertainty or discontinuity without panic? What does it feel to prepare without panic?
Without panic, yeah.
How can we share skills, food, water, warmth, and stories?
I love it. Let me add to that, if I may. Is this a good time?
Yes.
I want to add start with why. And if we were starting with why are we doing this, Melody? What is our why? I'll let you
To share the joy of connection and relationship.
Lovely. My why is, it reminds me of Nietzsche's why. He wrote decades, millennial ago, if a person has a why in life, he or she can tackle any how. And so my why comes from the Buddhist tradition of helping myself and others suffer less. As human beings, we're going to suffer, if you hadn't noticed. But how can I be a blessing to others, because others are such a blessing to me, and speak in ways and show up in ways that the suffering is definitely minimized, just as it is in grief. It's just minimized. So we start with why. We can start with our communities start with why. Why did you show up at dinner? Yeah. Okay, continue on that.
And curiosity to learn more is also a good reason why people might show up at a circle that you're inviting them to. And then one of the things I want to share is that my belief is that community resilience begins with relationship, begins with threads of connection. So, and so I've got a little outline, a little template that we can share with folks if they're interested. But here's what I see happening as a result of the conversations that will be ongoing. Because I have a list of resources for how to prep to filter water and water storage and food storage and all those practical things. But the biggest gift of this core community, core circle, is what I call a mycelial matchmaking. The mycelia are like the roots that hold all of the forest together.
How do you spell that? Let us spell that.
Myceli, mycelial. These like hair thin threads of networks that connect tree to tree, plant to plant. They're underfoot when we're in the woods. Part of the gift the woods are giving us is not just the breeze and the shade canopy, but the mycelial network underfoot.
Mycelial. Yes. I want to get it to go right in. At first it sounds like my cereal. That's why I said spell it, folks, like mycelia. Got it.
Mycelial. And so this is the way that I think of mutual aid, as a mycelial matchmaking. These are hair-thin threads of connection, but they are enough to flow resources to the tree that's in trouble.
Yes.
And
Yes.
yeah, and so what I see are like a list of what skills we need, what skills are the most vulnerable in the community need. What are the needs and who can
Yes.
matchmake that? What are the
Yes.
skills? What are the tools? Can we share water filters, tools? Can we share skill sets? Right?
Yes.
Can I teach a class and you teach a class? Like these are the ways that resilience is resourced. Is that
Well, I
what
just
I
got
would
a hit
share?
from listening to you, and that is we can promise at the end of our fourth episode of this series would be best practices. And then have a clarion call to people, send us best practices as it relates to connecting communities. I mean, exponentially, I can just feel the barrage of input. Because again, it's about all of us being together and connected. And while Melody and I and others who show up on this podcast will share what we know that all of you listening, some 4,000 plus folks, know as much. And imagine having a container, if you will, that you send it to us and then we send it right back out and we send it back up. So it's the sign of, it's just the Mobius sign, they call that, the infinity, where it just continues to feed and grow on its own.
Yeah.
Oof.
Yeah. And there's a couple different frameworks that people can hold. And Spirit had to scold me because I was holding, there's a framework of charity or giving to others that there's in our Western culture, there's some white saviorism elements to that, some one up, one down sort of hierarchy in that, that people who have give to the people who have not. Okay. And Spirit had to say, there's a different, let that go.
Yes.
Let that overgiving, let that charity framework go and bring in the framework that I have learned in my racial equity work, which is the framework of mutual aid.
Absolutely. I'm getting my chills right now, is absolutely. It's like sometimes, we give because we're abundant and they say too much one is given, much is expected. And yet, and I'm getting my chills again, everybody. So what's really true is when I'm giving of something that someone has requested, then I ask for something that's authentic. If it's the time of day or to share with someone else, because then it doesn't have anybody like in their minds beholding to the gift that they got. But rather, when you receive, then give it away. You pay it forward. We've heard that before. But I love to be mindful on this particular episode to say that the paradigms that we hold, we need to check them out and see if they still serve us. And that's why I like, Melody, when you're saying, the privilege of giving. It always reminds me, I was speaking to a friend of mine yesterday about giving, right? If I had it for everyone today, I would give it to you. But look up in the prophet, Gahil Gibran's wonderful text that I read at the age of 21 and love, just 2-3 pages on something. And he talks about giving, and so I'm going to let you look at that. But what I want to share is, first of all, we think when we're giving to someone, it's from me to you. It's really back to yourself. We give what we have, but the blessing really to me is I get it tenfold back, and I like the feeling. So it's always a reciprocal exchange. And to really, for me, I want to study more about it, because what I was going to say was there are people, and I hope I get this scale right. There's frugal, there is stingy, there's generous, and what I never knew, there's wastefulness. So while I'm going about my life being generous, 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 I went, you actually have given so much that you're on the side of wastefulness, the extreme. So we want to be mindful of being in the middle.
Right.
being in the middle. And I don't think stingy is the word. They'll have to recalibrate that one. Certainly frugal is being mindful is great. Maybe frugal moves into the stingy space and that moves over.
You
But
know,
you get my point.
there's a way in which when you describe those, there's a way in which this giving with mindfulness makes me think of sustainability. It is
Yeah.
sustainable over time, over decades, right? As our needs change. I just want to give one example
Please.
of how this can work, how it worked in our neighborhood. We learned that, in the weeks without power and water, we learned that neighborhoods near ours, by this time, by maybe 3 or 4 days in, neighbors with chainsaws had cut down the big trees blocking the roads, and we could get in and out. And we had learned that in neighborhoods near ours, generators were being stolen out of people's driveways at night. Now, remember, no power, no street lights.
Yeah.
And so, some of our neighbors were talking about patrolling with guns. And my husband said, why don't we? He said, I volunteer for the parkway. I've got some bright vests. Why don't we simply patrol with these bright, visible in headlights vests with flashlights? All people need to know is that the neighborhood is being patrolled. And so a group of men with flashlights and vests, but without guns, started patrolling at dusk and after dark. And yes, there were several trucks that came into the neighborhood and made a U-turn and went right out when the men in vests were seen walking up and down the streets. So we prevented, there's a way in which that our connections and conversations resulted in protection, resulted in, being able to defend ourselves well.
Yes, in a way that
without
was
harm.
violence, absolutely, without harm. And, again, the environment, talking about guns in America primarily, as if it's the only way to solve issues or upsetness is to go get a gun. I read something recently. It said, very soon, if we have World War III, World War IV will be with sticks and stones. Because we need to be really careful.
Yeah.
Really careful, find alternative ways within communities to solve problems, raise issues, talk about how we can generate mindfulness, how we can generate more peace, and how to generate more connectedness. Because I'm telling you, I'm living in just a 23-person community, and what I get is, hi. No stopping, a couple of us stop and talk, but that's not connectedness. That's
Right.
I got somewhere else to go, and I'm going to live in my house, and I'm not going to move to my job, and I'm not going to nothing in between there. We've lost that, where people in the neighborhood used to look out for the kids that are playing in the streets, or look out for stranger danger, or whatever. We just lost that, and I believe we can recreate it and rebuild it. Yeah.
That's exactly what my job from Spirit is for this year. So we're rebuilding a connected community.
Well, I'm joining you. I'm signing up with your team in a community not in Asheville, but in Merida, Georgia. Yes, we can do this. Yeah.
Yeah, we can.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, you didn't get to read that thing in the beginning, so you can read it now on why this is such a wonderful, blessed day to be recording our first podcast.
Right. Let me find that. I love that. I just sent it to you last night. Yeah. So I always like to, in addition to my sensitivity to the land, I also like to pay attention to the star nations, to what the sky mysteries are telling us. And last night, I read from one of my favorite astrologers, Virginia Rosenberg. She sent out an email called Mercury Enters Leo Today until September 2nd. And she wrote, the etymology of courage comes from heart. Take heart, we say. Take it to heart. Speak from the heart. Inside a climate decorated with the trappings of a dying paradigm, we are all being asked to do the slow and holy work of sustainable regeneration, to create new life inside our consciousness, inside our relationships, inside our systems, not all at once, not dramatically, but intentionally. This is not a time without fear.
Yeah.
There is grief. There is disorientation. There is discontinuity. But Leo reminds us, you can be afraid and still create.
Yeah.
Still express. The courage to speak from the heart is also the courage to live from the heart.
So, so it's about that time, Melody, and I'd like us to summarize what we've spoken about and give people some resources and a call to action that they too can take action this weekend with their communities. So,
yes, absolutely. So if you want to up your game on your preparations for discontinuity, for disasters, I highly recommend checking out another podcast. This one with two women. It's called Cramming for the Apocalypse, and it has tons of resources about water, food storage, all the things. And so I think that would be a great resource. And then I would just say, be willing to start one conversation with one other person you live close to create more connection. And yes, and if you want to get on my email list, because I'm sending out once every month or two, I'm sending out emails to my list about how to do this. Go to my website, which is transformingspace.com, and sign up for my newsletter.
excellent, excellent. Thank you, Melody. And in wrapping up, again, I do trust you've gotten quite a bit of little nuggets from our episode in the why of connected communities and how it benefits all of us living so closely together in these times. For more information from me, certainly go to my website, carverassociates.com, which will have a lot of information about all our podcasts, as well as you can email me at wellnesswholenesswisdom@gmail.com. We look forward to seeing you on our next, or hearing from you and being liked by you on our second podcast on connected communities. Thanks so much.